Have you ever paused to consider why the simple act of buying a loaf of bread feels like a participation in a complex global ritual? Why the interest rate on your smartphone loan is decided in a boardroom thousands of miles away? Or why the wealth of nations can evaporate as quickly as morning mist? This is the realm of macroeconomics, the study of the big picture, the grand symphony of forces that dictate the pulse of civilizations. While microeconomics focuses on the individual notes, the person, the firm, the single transaction, macroeconomics is the conductor, analyzing the entire orchestra of inflation, growth, unemployment, and government power. It is not just a branch of social science, it is the invisible architecture of our daily lives. To master macroeconomics, one must first embrace the circular flow of the system. Imagine the economy as a living, breathing organism, where everything is interconnected. Production, income, and spending are not separate events. They are different reflections of the same process. When a firm creates a product, it generates wages for workers. These wages become the income that households spend back on goods and services, which in turn fuels further production. This loop is the heartbeat of society. If confidence wavers and the pulse slows, the entire system feels the chill. If people spend less, firms produce less, leading to layoffs, which further reduces spending. This self-reinforcing cycle explains why economic downturns can feel like an unstoppable slide. In this drama, three main players take the stage: households, who provide the labor; firms, who organize production; and the government, which acts as the regulator and emergency responder. At the center of this stage stands the most discussed and often most feared character: inflation. Contrary to popular belief, inflation is not simply a state of high prices. It is a dynamic process where prices rise over time, eroding the purchasing power of your money. If a coffee costs $10 today and $11 next year, that is a price change. But if the value of your currency continues to shrink year after year, that is inflation, the hidden thief that makes your savings work less for you. In 2026, we understand that inflation is driven by four powerful forces. First is demand-side inflation, where a booming economy creates more desire for goods than factories can supply. Second is supply-side inflation, where shocks, like energy transitions or supply chain disruptions, make production more expensive. Third is monetary inflation, occurring when central banks flood the system with more money than the economy produces in value. Finally, there is the psychological force. If people expect prices to rise, they act in ways that ensure they do, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. This leads us to the distinction between the official cost of living and your personal inflation. Statistical agencies use the Consumer Price Index, CPI, a metaphorical basket of goods, to track average price movements. However, in the modern world, no household is truly average. If you spend 60% of your income on green energy and organic food, your personal inflation rate will look vastly different from the official government figures. Recognizing this gap is the first step to financial sovereignty. It allows you to see that while inflation is a hidden tax on savers, it can occasionally benefit those with fixed-rate debt, as they pay back their loans with money that is worth less than when they borrowed it. As we navigate the complexities of 2026, the role of the government through fiscal policy becomes paramount. Governments influence the economy's direction by deciding how much to tax and where to spend. When a recession hits, the government often steps in with expansionary policy, increasing spending or cutting taxes to fill the gap left by a retreating private sector. However, this comes with the burden of public debt. Debt is sustainable as long as the economy grows faster than the interest on that debt. But when interest payments begin to devour the budget for education and infrastructure, a country enters a debt trap. Investors then demand a risk premium, extra interest to compensate for the danger of default, which can trigger a downward spiral of currency devaluation and capital flight. Parallel to the government is the central bank, the bank of the banks. Institutions like the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank manage the economy through monetary policy, with their primary weapon being interest rates. In the current landscape of 2026, interest rates are the lever that balances growth and stability. High rates are used to cool an overheating inflationary economy, making borrowing expensive and saving more attractive. Low rates do the opposite, encouraging firms to invest and households to spend. For the modern investor, the central bank's decisions are the ultimate signal. When rates are low, money flows into risk assets like stocks and real estate, driving prices to new heights. When rates rise, the safety of government bonds becomes more alluring, often causing a recalibration of global markets. The independence of these banks is vital. They must have the courage to make painful decisions for long-term health, even when political leaders crave short-term popularity. Beyond national borders, macroeconomics becomes the study of exchange rates and global trade. The value of a currency is a vote of confidence in a nation's future. If a country is innovative, stable, and growing, global investors will demand its currency, driving its value up. A strong currency makes imports cheaper, raising the standard of living for consumers. But it can also make exports expensive, potentially leading to a trade deficit. Conversely, a weak currency can be a tool for growth, making a nation's products cheaper for the rest of the world and boosting domestic industry. In 2026, we see the rise of net reserves, the true measure of a central bank's power, which accounts for foreign assets minus looming liabilities. This war chest is what allows a nation to protect its currency during times of global instability. The ultimate scoreboard for all this activity is gross domestic product, GDP. It measures the total value of everything produced within a country's borders. But as we have learned, nominal GDP can be deceptive. It can grow simply because prices went up. To see the truth, we look at real GDP, which adjusts for inflation to show actual growth in output. Furthermore, GDP per capita serves as our rough proxy for the average standard of living. While GDP does not capture the informal economy or the quality of our environment, it remains the most powerful indicator of a nation's economic health and its position in the business cycle. The business cycle is the natural rhythm of the human endeavor: expansion, slowdown, recession, and recovery. It is a cycle driven by technology, policy, and human psychology. Recessions are often the result of a sudden drop in spending or a systemic shock, like the financial crisis of 2008 or the health crisis of 2020. Yet, they also serve as a period of creative destruction, where inefficient practices are purged and the seeds of the next recovery are sown. By 2026, the integration of macroeconomics into personal finance has moved from the classroom to the smartphone. Investors now track the economic calendar with the same intensity they once reserved for sports scores, knowing that a single employment report can shift the trajectory of their portfolio. In conclusion, macroeconomics is not a dry collection of charts and formulas. It is the story of how we organize our world, how we value our labor, and how we dream of a more prosperous future. It is the study of the connectedness of things. Once you understand that the economy is a system, a living loop of production, income, and spending, the world stops being a series of confusing accidents. It becomes a map. Whether you are a student, an entrepreneur, or a creator of folk remedies, understanding these big forces allows you to navigate the winds of change rather than being blown away by them. In the grand theater of 2026, Macroeconomics is the script, and those who can read it are the ones who will lead the way.